Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Phillips, John Salmons. Which of you are sorry on screen?
I'm Councillor Derman. I'm in my professional work account, so shows a different surname. That's
all right. You have 5 minutes between you. So I hope you've sort of worked out who's going to say what and when. And your 5 minutes starts from now.
So my name is Sarah Phillips and I'm the head teacher of Blindles Nursery School, which directly adjoins the site, which is today being considered. Our local authority maintained school provides a safe and inclusive environment for young children aged 2 to 5, and we currently have 108 children on roll. Some of our children have special educational needs and disabilities, including autism, and children who wear hearing devices. Their health, wellbeing and safety must be paramount in any planning decision. We remain deeply concerned about this application, particularly the proximity and nature of the substation, plant compound, bin store and turning head, which pose a serious and direct risk to our children. These structures are located extremely close to our boundary, just metres from classrooms and outdoor play areas. Despite having raised our concerns repeatedly over many months, these issues have not been adequately addressed by the applicant nor fully scrutinised by the council. Let me be clear, we're not opposing development in principle. We're simply asking for a responsible development that considers its youngest and most vulnerable learners and neighbours. We flag significant noise, vibration, pollution and pest risks that would arise not only during construction but in the ongoing operation from plant, machinery, vehicles and refuge collection. Yet the noise assessment and associated technical reports contain clear errors and assumptions that downplay these impacts. These flaws have been brought to the Council's attention and still no meaningful action has been made. National and local planning policy requires that developments must protect the amenity of neighbouring users, especially schools and nurseries. This proposal fails that test. We also know with alarm what appears to be a predetermined willingness by the Council to support this application, despite the serious and unresolved issues that remain. That undermines public trust in the planning process and, more importantly, places our children's safety and well-being at unnecessary risk. We're calling on the committee today to defer this application and let it only return once the applicant has reconsidered the placement of high-impact infrastructure, properly assessed and addressed the risk to our children, and engage meaningfully with us as neighbours and as a vital part of our local community. The families who entrust us with their children each day do so believing they are safe. Please ensure this development does not put that trust in those children at risk. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm John Sands. I'm a local resident, and there are three things I want you to bear in mind this evening. First, the officer's recommendation is nothing more than that, a recommendation. If you read my email last week, you'll know it is a flawed recommendation. It was predetermined, didn't take into account all material considerations, and was based on clear misinterpretations of national and local planning policy. Second, granting permission for this scheme would benefit nobody, not even the applicant themselves. Local government reorganisation means the applicant is no longer in any position to deliver this scheme. They've already made statements acknowledging as such. If you grant permission, you won't kickstart a regeneration, you will only delay it with years more uncertainty. But most importantly, this scheme is a significant and completely indefensible departure from the development plan. This site is allocated for housing, not an employment use. There is no evidence of any shortage of employment land in Didcot or the district. As you will hear in relation to the other applications this evening, there is a desperate shortage of land for housing. This council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. Granting this permission to reallocate a strategic housing site for an office would make a mockery of the entire planning system. The battle lines are drawn on this application. On one side, the town council, the neighbouring parish councils, the nursery school, and the overwhelming majority of local residents, ordinary people depending on you to uphold planning law and planning policy. On the other side is an applicant which has demonstrated contempt for the local community and the planning system. The question this evening is whether this committee will stand with the community or with itself. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a minute left.
So I'm Councillor Derman from Western Valley. This has come to our planning council twice. The amendments show no substantial improvement, so our comments are as the planning committee of the Western Valley Parish Council objects and concurs with other objectors. The application on the grounds of lack of parking, particularly for future disabled visitors and staff, for whom getting from nearby car parks will be too difficult. The site is already allocated for housing under H2F and South Oxfordshire District Council Brownfield Land Register, January 2021. This area shows it is dedicated for housing. Further to these material planning considerations, we'd like to also submit the comments as an entrance to Didcot and the surrounding areas as an opportunity. This may have been missed. It should be created as a building of notable character, and this building is not a reflection of Didcot or
Thank
the
you.
master
That's your
plan
time.
garden town.
Thank you. Sorry, that was rushed. But that was 5 minutes. Okay, committee, have you any questions for any one of the speakers? Councillor Alex.
Yeah, John Salmons. I was one of the ones that did read your 5-page email. Very fortunate because I normally only get to read the first page. But having known you, I decided to read all 5 of the pages. And obviously, some of your comments are obviously different from the plan officer, and I'll be asking a couple of questions in a minute. Could I just go back, basically, go to the final page of your email, the second from the last paragraph, and I'll read it out. It basically says, "It is plainly in everyone's interest that this application is refused and that the applicant is urged to reconsider its options in relation to the site, with the most advantageous outcome at this stage presumably being the council to sell the land to a developer who is, unlike the council, in a position to actually deliver a regeneration scheme on this site in the future, in the near future." What do you mean by that?
So I'm a resident of Didcot. I want to see something brilliant at the gateway to our town. The first impression when people get off the train or when they go past the town on the train, what they see is a reflection of Didcot. This building is hideous. What's proposed is hideous. It's a brick 1980s style office block. That's not what I want to see reflected there. So I want to see this site regenerated. It's currently a car park, which is also hideous. I think the only comments in support of this in the consultation were comments saying, well, it's better than the car park that's there today. We all know the story there. So I want to see it regenerated. The applicant is not in a position to spend £25 million, the budget envelope for this scheme. £25 million of taxpayers' money building a vanity project for itself. At this point, where the council has been given a death sentence, it won't exist long enough to build this scheme, and it won't need a headquarter office when it doesn't exist. So the applicant's not going to build.
You're not really answering the question. The question is basically you want to sell it on to a developer.
So I want to see it redeveloped. I want to see that site fantastic, something brilliant that when people go past the town, they get to the town, they see something brilliant. This isn't it. If you grant permission, like I said, it's not even going to happen. All that's going to happen is we're going to have years more uncertainty and nothing is going to happen with that site. In 2 weeks, this committee is going to get together again to consider a different application to extend permission for the car park for another 2 years. Why is the applicant requesting that permission for another 2-year extension of the car park if they want this?
Still not answering the question that I raised.
I'm trying to.
Well, you're going off piece at the moment.
I want to see it redeveloped. That's why I made that comment to your question. This applicant is not in a position to deliver this scheme. It won't happen. You can grant permission for it. All you're going to do is create years more uncertainty. The best thing for everyone, as I said in that paragraph, is that the council disposes of the land and it goes into the hands of somebody that can regenerate the site and do something that people in the town actually want. You've heard from everyone here, none of whom want this scheme to be delivered for Didcot.
Right. Any other questions?
Well, you didn't really answer the question.
He didn't answer the question, but
So if you reframe it, I'll happy to.
Well, what concerns me, the district council own a portion of land which has a value on it, and I don't believe the district council are in a position to give the land away.
I'm not asking them to give it away.
Yeah, but this was going to give. What developer is going to come along and build a vanity project? Maybe what you want.
I want to see a mixed-use development site. So right now it's allocated for housing. I think you would have a queue of private developers who would want to build apartments 38 minutes from central London.
That's a different question. That's a different answer to the question I raised, which I can accept that.
yeah, okay. Right. I'm going to stop that because Okay, yeah, it's all right, okay. No further questions. No further questions, so thank you for your time and your presentation. Right, I have two supporters who are Catherine Jones and three supporters, Catherine Jones, David College and Chris Long.
Yeah, but Chris and Naomi are here to answer any technical questions, but I'll be the main speaker.
Okay,
Okay,
you have 5 minutes between you.
thank you. Good evening all. My name is Catherine Jones and I'm a partner in the planning team at Carter Jonas. The proposed development before you is for a new office building, including a public plaza, a coffee shop, landscaping and associated infrastructure to transform a temporary car park into high quality public realm. The site forms a prominent gateway to the town and is key to the arrival experience into Didcot by rail and by road. The site is allocated for regeneration as part of SODC's adopted local plan, and the proposed development of a new office building is wholly consistent with the council's strategy for employment growth in Didcot. The accessibility of the site and the need for more flexible mixed uses in this location is also recognised by the Didcot Gateway allocation in the emerging joint local plan. The site forms part of the Didcot Gateway Town Master Plan approved by South Oxfordshire District Council in 2017. That master plan set out an overall vision for the area, the infrastructure requirements, the placemaking strategy, and design principles, and is a material consideration in the context of this planning application. The master plan also identifies the site as an important regeneration opportunity with an active frontage onto Station Road. The design process for this has been led by Ridge, a firm of multidisciplinary and property and construction consultants. To develop the proposals, Ridge, alongside the applicant and the project team, undertook extensive pre-application engagement with officers and local stakeholders, including a member design group of councillors and members of the public. And this engagement has directly informed the design decisions and the proposals presented here today. The proposed development has been carefully designed in accordance with the Gateway Master Plan, which has guided the scale, the massing, and the layout of the development in the context of other neighbouring land uses. Lidl's nursery has been a key consideration for the applicant in developing these proposals, and we acknowledge their concerns. The applicant has carefully incorporated mitigation measures to prevent any adverse impact on the nursery. And some of these include acoustic fencing and landscaping along the southern boundary, a fully enclosed bin store and substation, and fencing to plant compounds, limiting any minor noise or odour, and the setting back of the roof terrace on the southern elevation of the building to prevent any harm to privacy and overlooking. That noise will be controlled in accordance with the parameters in the acoustic report, and any waste will be limited to dry uses given the nature of the office use. As such, the Council's Environmental Health Officer and Air Quality Officers are satisfied with the proposal and have raised no objection with respect to environmental health, subject to the conditions set out in your officer's report. The development will deliver a number of public benefits, most notably the provision of new employment space in the heart of Science Vale and in a sustainable location in walking distance of housing and town centre facilities, accessible via a range of active travel modes, reducing the reliance on the private car for staff and visitors. Although I will note at this point that there is parking and disability parking included as part of the proposal. The efficient use of brownfield sites for high quality office building, which has been designed to achieve BREEAM Excellent alongside enhanced public realm, is another key benefit. So too are improvements to public connectivity, including new cycle parking facilities and the safeguarding of land at the site frontage to form part of a future bus lay-by. So too are significant biodiversity net gains on site of over 300% and the creation of attractive public spaces, including a coffee shop, a landscape plaza, all of which will improve the arrival experience into Didcot. This planning application has been thoroughly considered by officers of South Oxfordshire District Council and the County Council over a 2-year determination period, which has allowed the scheme to evolve. This process has resulted in all technical officers confirming support for the planning application, subject to the conditions which are set out in the officer's report. To conclude, this development will create a vibrant, sustainable and inclusive future for Didcot. The proposal aligns with the National Planning Policy Framework, your adopted local plan and the Didcot Garden Town Vision. Your officers have produced a very thorough report and have concluded that the balance lies squarely with the recommendation for approval. And as such, I would ask you to please accept that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Richie, any questions? Councillor Norman and Councillor Arnott.
You said you're from Carter Jonas. What is your relationship to this development?
So Carter Jonas, we're the planning consultants. We act as the planning consultants for South Oxfordshire Council as the applicant. We didn't start as the agent, so Rich led and submitted the application, and we were brought in 2024 to guide the planning consultancy side of things.
Thank you. And so you referred to the Didcot Master Plan 2017. Have I got that right?
Approved by the council in 2017.
What is the status of that master plan, and was it at that stage that site was designated for housing, which is, however, in the local plan?
Yeah,
Can you just explain how that works?
Yeah, the site is allocated for housing, which is in the South Oxfordshire local plan, which is adopted development plan document. The Didcot Gateway Town Master Plan does not form part of the development plan, but it's a material consideration in the context of the application. But yes, you're correct. The site is allocated, and H2F, I believe it is, for housing.
Yes, that's right. So the master plan, what is it designated for within that master plan, which predates, I think, the South Oxfordshire local plan?
It showed as housing.
As housing in the master plan.
Mm.
So how does that square with? I think you said that the master plan, that this was consistent with the master plan. I think
In terms of the regeneration approach for the site. So we've got the Homes England site. Yeah. So the emerging Joint South and Vale local plan recognises the flexible need for mixed uses across the Didcot Gateway Master Plan, and so the quantum of development for housing is reduced, and the need for the office has been reflected in that emerging policy. But at the time, the site was envisaged for housing.
just explain that last point again. You said the need for housing has reduced.
So the need for housing remains, but in terms of how the site is envisaged to come forward in the emerging joint local plan is more of a mixed use across the gateway development. So reduced quantum of housing with mixed uses, including an office.
Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Yes, can I just pick up on the car park spaces? I'm looking on the numbers on these pages. On the Equalities Officer, his comments: the 24 car park spaces, including 3 spaces for disabled parking, do not seem enough. The disabled bays are a long way from the building entrance, and the parking generally, particularly for workers carrying heavy equipment. 24 car park spaces, 305 people working there. Where do you just suggest they're meant to be 50 cycle spaces? I'm not sure if that many people do cycle to work. Maybe somebody could answer that question for me. But 305 people working in that proposed building for 24 spaces, which 3 are for disabled, seems very low to me.
Proposals have, I'll start, and if needs be, I'll bring in my highways colleagues. So the proposals have changed since then. So there are 23 car parking spaces, 4 disabled parking spaces. You're right, 56 cycle parking spaces. County Council's position is a car-free scheme, and we've made the case here for operational parking. Quantum reflects the sustainability of the site in terms of its proximity to bus and rail links. Walking distance of town centre, and the Highways Authority is content with the parking provision proposed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jones. Thank you. Okay, I think it's time to go back to the planning officer. What issues are raised there? Do you want to speak first?
Yes, Chair, can I just offer some general advice to the committee before we go into questions? This application should be assessed on its planning merits in the normal way that members would consider any planning application that's submitted in the district. The identity of the applicant and the implications of the local government review are not material planning considerations in this case. Whilst the local government review may have implications for some council projects, this planning application can be progressed and assessed as we would consider any other application for office development in Didcot. of district, the wider district. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right. Question for the planning officer. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. Just a quick one. So, looking at the scope and size of the planned building, if we exclude the multi-storey car park associated with the railway station, which structure in Didcot is of similar height to the one that's being planned? Is there one nearby that's of similar height?
Not in the immediate environs, no. What's envisaged in both the Didcot master plan that was prepared in 2017, which was approved by the council, and as Ms Jones said, it's a material consideration. It's not part of the development plan. That envisaged development of the whole gateway site, and also envisaged an increase in height and elevation across the Didcot gateway site, basically to give some presence to that site. It's an area of arrival from Didcot station, so it was considered, in architectural terms, that it needed some elevation to provide some architectural interest. So that was a sort of starting point. And then another master plan has been prepared by the council. It's not gone through any approval process, so it's not a material consideration. It was only prepared to show that the different parcels on the gateway site could work together. So again, that envisages elevation and increase in height. So there's nothing in the immediate environs, because the Didcot gateway site is allocated for redevelopment, and obviously car parking has no buildings on it. It used to have a hotel on it, but we're looking to regenerate the area, and it will need some development and some presence there.
That's a normal.
Could you just please comment on the legality or the legal framework for the switch from the site having been designated for housing to now being proposed for an office building?
So the site is allocated for housing in the South Oxfordshire local plan. It doesn't say that the gateway site should be housing. It doesn't sort of say that it's with any strategic site. Normally you would expect other development to come along somewhat with it, but it does indicate that 300 dwellings could be accommodated there. This proposal reduces the amount of land that could be available for housing. And in terms of that master plan that I was just referring to, which shows how the whole gateway site could work, the numbers of housing would reduce to about 250. So that's in my report. But the strategy for Didcot as a whole is for housing and employment growth, and to achieve housing and employment. So we can't insist that applicants put forward applications for particular type of uses or development. We have to deal with them on its merits. And that's what we are doing here. We've got an application for office development. We don't see that it's at great conflict with the development plan. Housing would also be suitable here, but we also think that employment is suitable here.
So is it fair to say that although it was designated for housing and that is a material consideration, it's not an absolute bar to an application for some other use?
That's true, yes. And as Ms Jones said, our emerging local plan is reflecting a mixed use development allocation on this site with a reduced number of houses as well.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? The
emerging local
emerging
plan,
local
policy AS7.
That designates this as mixed use?
Yeah, I mean, I've got to caveat that because that's not an adopted policy yet, and we're going through that process. But that's the sort of vision at the moment in policy, planning policy terms.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions?
Yes,
Councillor Sadler.
because there's quite a lot of good stuff around this, the green standards and the energy performance, and 75% reduction, the green wall, all these good things. I'm slightly worried about the optics because because there is this problem with the nursery and overlooking, I believe, was mentioned, and the smell from the bin store, and and the fact that there's this designation for the housing and so forth. Could you just talk us through some of these? So, for example, on the living wall, could you just describe that? Because I think there's, another thing that's brought up is the sort of 1980s design of this building, but I think that there's probably some other things that do go in its favour, really, isn't there? With the living wall, could you just go through that?
Yeah,
What benefits?
There's 2 green walls proposed. They're the nature of that type of landscaping is that it will grow from the ground. You can get sort of water-fed green walls through the building itself. We had a discussion around that, but it adds a lot of weight to the building structure. So it was decided to have a green wall that actually grows from the ground. So it wouldn't be an immediate effect. It would take time to establish.
And that's through its own water harvesting as well, because
yes, there would be water. It would be water fed.
Yeah. Okay, and about the electromagnetic fields, because you talked in terms of micro Teslas and things, which is very interesting, but there was quite a lot of detail.
I've got to say, I'm not an expert in that. I'm completely taking the advice of the Environmental Health Officer, and that is what the Environmental Health Officer has said to me. He has no objection. He has no concerns. This is the type of substation that you would find on a housing development.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's all for now.
Further questions? Any further questions? No further questions. Well, thank you very much, Cathy. No questions for you. We need to move.
Oh, Chair, may I ask Paula a question? Because she mentioned about the government reorganisation and just shut that one down. And I understand why, but I think the problem is that on that objection from John Salmons, he made a great point about that. And do you think it deserves a little bit of talking through? Because I think the thing is, there is this government reorganisation. We know it's happening, but we don't know the outcome. And it kind of does raise a point. And if we just say, no, that's off the agenda.
And through your chair.
Yeah, I can answer that. It is off the agenda.
I'm afraid, because it's not a material planning consideration that's relevant to your assessment of this application. My advice to you is that is separate, and we're not going to sort of go into the decision that the council might make in the future about pursuing the scheme.
This is planning permission for an office block. The use of that office block is not material to this meeting.
Just
it's an office block in Tidcote Gateway. It may well be the council headquarters in the future. It may well not. I think that's what you're saying. We don't know. It may well not ever get built. Which is another consideration. That's not a decision for other people to make, not for us to make. Yeah. This is the one that's on the table. We might not like it. Certain speakers have said they don't like it, but it's not the alternative that we're considering. We're considering this particular application for a office block in this location. Does it meet all the requirements for an office block? Does it meet the planning requirements? I think that's really what we got to ask ourselves. Not would we like something else? I'll do that. Yeah. Right. So looking for a proposal. Councillor MacDonald was quick in there.
I'm going to vote against officer's recommendation.
You want to propose refusal? Refusal on what ground?
On grounds of the height being overly dominant and out of character of the area.
Simply that one.
There have been lots of very good speeches, but none, unfortunately, were of planning consideration. But the one of the overly dominant in the area, because at the moment we're reliant on visions which aren't in our planning regime here at the moment, to compensate for its particular height and mass.
Okay. All right. So I have a proposal. Is that seconded? Councillor Albert.
Yeah, Jim, I do have a lot of difficulty with this application, the pros and against. I've had absolutely nothing to do with the design or with this application whatsoever. So I'm basically just speaking as I see it. It's a massive size, 5 stories. Is it 5 or 4 story? 4. Okay. Is that including the roof? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. And as my neighbour here was saying, there's nothing like that around the area. So I think we should be looking at the size and bulk over intensive. But I'd like to add into it about the privacy of the nursery, and that's mentioned by the OCC property concerns and the effects it will have on the visual privacy of the staff and the pupils of the nursery school. And I also have a problem with if it's in the original plan for housing and we haven't got a 5-year land supply, why would we want to take land away? I can't quite understand that one as well. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. So maybe we could add something in like that. But as I said, I just think the bike, the soul, the size overdevelopment is just massive for that area there compared with.
Okay, I've got a proposal made and seconded. We're open for debate. Does anybody wish to speak in a debate? Councillor Norman. I got a councillor afterwards.
I will be supporting the officer's recommendation, and I think that many of the points that the proposer has made have been satisfactorily dealt with. I think that I can understand. I don't know why this was ever designated for housing. I can understand. To my mind, it makes complete sense that employment should be provided as near to railway stations as possible, and this is part of a sustainability agenda, which makes sense. I don't see, leaving aside the question of LGR and whether this will ever be built and so on. We are not talking about the site is currently undeveloped. It is a car park, and I would have thought that an office building in this location next to a railway station in a historically industrial railway centre would be appropriate. I can't see any material reason for refusing it.
Thank you, Councillor Norman. Councillor Keach.
I completely in agreement with Councillor Norman. I think actually this building has got quite a lot going for it. It is a statement building. That's the way that bit of extra height is something that it could do with. It's a site that needs regeneration, and it will be a useful employment site. I mean, this is in the future going to be quite a striking building. I mean, we've got to leave a few years for the greenery to grow. But to me, this does look like a pretty good proposal. And it's not relevant whether or not it is this or any other future council that uses it. Everywhere needs office space, employment space, and as Councillor Norman points out, there's no better place than obviously a main line, really important railway station. It will have other amenities as well for public use, and so I think that every possible avenue has been explored to mitigate the problems that the nursery quite rightly feels it needs to air. I mean, that's absolutely right. But I think every effort has been made to address those concerns, including consultation with the environmental officer tonight. So I will also be supporting it.
Councillor Sutler.
Yeah, I had to sound a bit conflicted, if I'm honest. There were some statements about vanity project, which I think is wholly untrue, and I think the issue about housing is a relevant one, and I accept that. But I do agree with Councillor Norman that such a site near a railway station does make a lot of sense. I mean, I think, you've got to put an office block somewhere, and actually having it right there where people can get to it does make a lot of sense. And it should be a good position as a good gateway, really, for this council, whatever this council looks like, whatever that future council will be. The need did come about as a result of obviously the old building that burned down some years ago before I was around, anyway. So and obviously that was never resolved. So there was always going to be something that was put into place. And I think it does look like the council worked very hard on these building standards, energy performance, talked about green wall. They thought about having it looking attractive and so forth. I really do hear the concerns about the overlooking, particularly at the nursery school. And I'm just hopeful, if this goes ahead, that the council will be very sensitive about that particular issue and about that. And, maybe something could be done to kind of mitigate that a little bit or something. I don't know. So I'm a bit conflicted at the moment. I'm not really giving away where I'm actually at. But yeah, I do hear all this concern. I think in terms of the actual office space, if you've got something like 4,000 square meters, or I think obviously what I read, something like that over 4 stories, obviously you're not going to get that kind of housing density in that same space. So I think there's another point there which is worth considering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sutherland. Well, 10 years ago, Homes England got a planning application for a mixed-use development which included 1,800 square metres of commercial development, which planning committee of this council gave consent for. So this is only 4,000 square metres. So it's I'm not very good at maths, but about a quarter of the size of this office development. And I think you can argue that this proposal, the building itself, is not particularly fine. But you look at what I can say is, thank God it wasn't developed 20 or 30 years ago. We had the most ugly and off, the development, straight off the drawing board, that had no design features. The typical office block that's retired is now being demolished because they had no reducing features. And of course, Councillor Norman made an excellent point about our location. This is at the junction of what could be East-West Rail, rail connections to the north and beyond, and also connections to east and west. And this is the best rail-connected location in the whole of Oxfordshire. And to be honest, we should be seizing this opportunity to provide, as we are doing, a really good, office development, which does bring some character, I have to say, to Didcot. I'm familiar with Didcot, and I was so pleased that soon after I was elected, those derelict buildings at the end of the site were knocked down. But there's not much merit in, I'm sorry to say, Didcotians. There's not much architectural merit in Didcot, and I think this does offer something. I'm sorry to see the power station cooling towers have gone. They, of course, dominated our landscape much more than this office is ever going to do. And this could be, and hopefully, seeing the landscape master plan for this gateway, this could be the start of something quite good. And I'm sorry that probably the nursery school won't be there in 20 years' time, because it'll be moved off the county council and seen as a commercial opportunity by speculation. But anyway, there we are. So,
Chair, could I come back on just one factual matter, if that's okay?
Okay.
Just, Councillor Dragonetti referred to the 2015 scheme.
yes.
So an application was submitted that did envisage a range of mixed uses. There was a resolution to approve that, but the application was actually withdrawn. So just for the record, there wasn't a final decision on.
Okay. All right. We have up to public made and seconded. I now go to Councillor MacDonald to sum up.
There's a lot made of a brilliant place for commercial property to be put, and I certainly agree with that. Except in Didcot at the moment, with an easy reach of the railway station, we're busy converting commercial property into accommodation. And some quite large properties, which actually could have made some quite nice council offices, thinking about it, have been converted. So I'm unsure of that need. However, the planning application centres on this building, where it is, my opinion is it is overbearing and dominant and too tall. And it doesn't say welcome to Didcot. It says, here you are, Didcot. This is the best we can do for you. Thank you.
Okay, all right, so I have a proposal for refusal on the grounds of being overbearing and what else?
Size and bulk.
Size and bulk,
Out of character.
out of character with the area. All those in favour of the proposal, please show. All those against? Okay, that is lost. And now turn for a proposal. Or an alternative proposal.
I propose officer's recommendation.
Propose officer's recommendation. Is that
I'll
seconded?
second.
That's seconded. Do we need to debate? I think we've had enough debate, haven't we? Let's just go straight to the vote. All those in favour of officer's recommendation, that's proposed. And that's 1, 2, so that's 4. Those against? It's 1, so that is carried. Thank you, committee. We've now been asked for a short break while we bring in an audience for the second application. So we'll just stop that for a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, we're back live streaming. Yeah.
We're back live.
An application is important.
So we're moving on to planning application P25S0867, which is land off the B480 in Chalgrove. The planning officer is Nicholas Smith.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline application for up to 160 dwellings, far eastern end of Chalgrove. This site has been subject to 2 previous applications in recent years, and I'll discuss the detail of the planning history shortly. The application is substantially the same as the previous submission. However, the site.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we can hear a loud volume next door. I'm just wondering whether we could just have that turned down. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay. The application is substantially the same as the previous submission. However, the site in this case has been reduced slightly to take the developable area outside of the revised flood zones to Chalgrove Brook at the south, which is indicated by the blue section on the plan. So access to the site would be taken from the B480, which is in yellow on the plan on screen. A new simple junction is proposed, including a right turn lane. A footway cycleway is also proposed through the site and across the front of the adjoining development by Miller Homes, as far as the roundabout in pink, to enable access to the footpath cycleway network towards the village. The site is currently in agricultural use. The photo at the bottom of the slide shows the site as viewed from the B480. And there's an existing agricultural access as marked by the gate. You can see in that photograph a large tree block, which is located approximately halfway through the site. The photos at the top show the B480 as it runs past the site. These pictures are taken from the public right-of-way, which enters the site at the southwestern corner, leading through from the adjoining Miller Homes development to the wider countryside beyond. The line's not formally marked and laid out, but it's clear that it's well used. And this footpath is to be retained and upgraded through the open space of the development. These pictures also show the woodland block in the centre of the site and the tree belt marking the boundary of the site to the east. The application is in outline, so no details of the layout or design of the houses are included at this stage. However, this illustrative development framework plan has been submitted to indicate how the development could be accommodated on the site, whilst retaining important features such as the woodland block that you can see in dark green in the centre, and the public right-of-way, which is denoted by the yellow dashed line through the site, kind of from the corner of the other development sites to the west, leading out to the open countryside. The proposed development is largely located in the northern part of the site, with some blocks extending around the woodland in the centre. And the southern part of the site is mostly dominated by open space, with 2 play areas, allotments, an orchard, a large drainage basin, together with natural green space. These proposals have changed very little from the previous applications. Turning now to the site history. The first application on this site was received in 2022 for essentially the same development as is currently proposed. The application was refused under powers delegated to officers for 5 reasons, and these are summarised as: number 1, the development is contrary to the development plan; 2, there would be unacceptable landscape harm; 3, no archaeology information was submitted; and 4 and 5 related to the absence of a legal agreement to secure the infrastructure and affordable housing required. This refusal was appealed, and the appeal was dismissed in early 2023. However, an appeal decision is not always the end of the story, and whilst dismissing the appeal at the time, the inspector did leave the door open for further applications which could succeed in the future. With specific regard to the reasons for refusal, numbers 3, 4 and 5 fell away at the appeal as the required archaeology information was submitted and a legal agreement was agreed with the council to secure the infrastructure. Reason 3 would not apply to this application, as the archaeology information is up to date and to the satisfaction of the county archaeologist, and conditions are recommended to ensure proper archaeological investigation is carried out. Reasons 4 and 5 were overcome at the appeal by the signing of a legal agreement, which the applicants have advised they would be willing to do again. If the application is approved, work will begin on drawing up that agreement. If, however, the application were to be refused, the same reasons would also apply. In respect of the landscape harm, which was reason for refusal number 2, the inspector concluded that the landscape and visual effects of the development would have a limited and enduring moderate adverse effect. As such, the proposal would conflict with local plan policy ENV1, landscape and countryside. The inspector attached moderate weight in the planning balance to the landscape and visual harm. The situation in respect to the landscape harm has not altered from 2023, when that decision was made. Some harm to the landscape will arise from the development, and I have given this moderate weight in the planning balance as per the appeal decision. With regard to the first reason for refusal, this is the crux of the matter, and ultimately the reason I've now made the recommendation that I have for permission is the conflict with the development plan and the extent to which paragraph 11D of the MPPF applies to this proposal. The site is not allocated in either the local plan or the neighbourhood plan and lies outside the built-up area of Chalgrove. The development remains in conflict with the spatial strategy for the district. However, South Oxfordshire cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing, as we've already talked about this evening. Our published statement in January of this year put it at 4.5 years, but a recent appeal decision found it to be 4.1. In making the decision in 2022, the inspector for this site noted that the council were unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing at that time either. And the paragraph 11D of the MPPF states that where the most important policies for determining a proposal are out of date, i.e. there's no 5-year land supply, permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against policies of the framework read as a whole. And this is commonly known as the tilted balance. However, the inspector then went on to say that the relative youth of the development plan and the importance of maintaining public confidence in the planning process are such that very significant weight was attached to the conflict with the development plan and the harm that flowed from that. And his conclusion was predicated on the age of the local plan at that time and the neighbourhood plan. The local plan, as you know, was adopted in 2020 and was less than 3 years old at the time of the decision. It is now 4.5 years old and due to be replaced by the joint local plan within the year, is the programme. The Chalgrove neighbourhood plan was made in 2018 and is now 7 years old. Paragraph 14 of the MPPF states that in situations where paragraph 11D applies, the adverse impact of allowing the development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, provided that the neighbourhood plan is 5 years old or less and makes allocations to meet its identified housing requirements. As the Chalgrove neighbourhood plan is more than 5 years old, the additional protection afforded by paragraph 14 does not apply, whereas it did in 2023 when the appeal decision was made. Officers consider that we are no longer in a situation where the relative youth of the plan can be claimed and the tilted balance must be applied to this scheme. Section 10 of my report goes into detail about the matters that weigh for and against the proposal, concluding that whilst there are impacts of the proposal which weigh against it, notably landscape impact, conflict with the development plan, lack of school places and connectivity, taken together, they do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing additional homes. The presumption in favour of sustainable development set out in the NPPF at paragraph 11 means that if the policies which are most important are out of date, i.e. there's no 5-year land supply, the starting point is to grant permission unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The application is therefore recommended for permission, subject to the conditions set out in my report and a legal agreement.
Okay, thank
Thank
you,
you.
Nicola. Right, we have a number of speakers on this. First speaker is Councillor Jan Russell from Charlegrove Parish Council. We'll have 5 minutes starting from where
Yeah, I
you.
was actually told I had 3 minutes, so might.
I don't know. That's the
Yes.
second one that said we've never had 3 minutes.
That's what we were told.
Why who?
But it isn't actually. It came through our clerk, so I'm not sure. But
From your clerk at the Charlegrove.
yeah.
No, she's wrong.
Wasn't she asked for somebody?
Somebody called Anne.
No, someone called Anne told her.
SODC clerk.
Anyway, that's fine.
Well, we'll take that up because it's
Yeah.
never been the case in this council.
Okay. Fine. First of all, I'd like to point out something that was on the application. You're not actually looking at the same piece of land as we are, because you're looking at something in OX49, which is down the road in Jackson. Our postcode for this piece of land is OX44. So it's probably right to get the right area first. Good. Adjuralia said build, 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 but she also added on to her statement the right houses in the right places. Charlegrove Parish Council is totally opposed to this application, as we have been all the way through. Charlegrove Primary School has a capacity in its academy funding agreement of 210 places. As of yesterday, they have 224 pupils, including nursery, on their roll. Figures in the officers' reports are out in the report are out of date. The Meadowbrook development, still under construction, means many children will need school places for years to come. There's been talk of Charlegrove expanding. Firstly, it's not possible, they don't have land. Secondly, they are a trust, so OCC have no control over them. Watlington and Benson schools. Watlington has got room to expand, but at the moment they have 313 houses which will fill, and also further development going on. Benson have already expanded, but the governor is now saying that that school will be filled when their development is completed. Parents on this new site will have to drive considerable distances to find schools. This is having an impact, which we are seeing on locals, especially in social housing, where small children are being taxied many miles to schools, costing OCC and the taxpayer a lot of money. All primary schools within a 20-mile radius of Charlegrove are under similar pressure. Preschool provision is exactly the same. Charlegrove First Steps Family Hub is a charity. It's full. With no state funding, they survive on grants from the parish council and others. They are meeting a bigger and bigger increase in preventative work with struggling families. Recently, 2 families at risk have been supported through feelings of complete isolation and despair because without transport, they are removed from statutory support services in Oxford. They can't get there. The lack of SEND places in the whole area is well documented. OCC objected on education grounds. We believe that this is a serious issue which affects the mental well-being of not only existing residents, but any new residents. Going on to housing, Meadowbrook, which is still in construction, originally had 200 properties. 120 of those were put up for market sale. However, after price reductions of nearly 30,000 on a lot of them, they had to reduce it to 67 up for market sale because they were not selling. With a new mix now, 73 shared ownership, 60 a mix of affordable rent and social housing. The affordable housing numbers in the application are incorrect. In February 22, they assert that there was long waiting times for 1, 2 and 3 bed homes in Chalgrove. Ironically, the only houses that aren't selling at Meadowbrook are 1, 2 and 3 bedroom houses. Interest has been extremely limited. The social housing element is being filled by people from as far away as London, as there is no local need. We are hearing really upsetting stories from these residents. They are lonely. They can find no employment locally because there isn't it. There are limited and expensive retail options in the 2 village shops. Public transport options are sparse, to say the least. Those that do use the bus, for example, NHS workers, are stranded in the evenings because the last bus from Oxford to Chalgrove is 6 o'clock. The number 11 bus runs at a less than hourly frequency, and none of the proposals in this application will change that. There's no additional bus stops. There's no additional routes planned to other employment centres in the county. There are no local train stations. They are 10 miles away and require a car. Parking is very limited. Our lanes are narrow and fast, significantly reducing any cycling options. Pavements are narrow and non-existent along the high street. They've seen that, with poor accessibility for wheelchairs and pushchairs. If you can make it to the doctors, waiting times are now between 3 and 4 weeks.
Thank you. That's
Last sentence. In short, if you buy a house in the middle of a field, you get no school, no doctors, no shops, no transport, no employment, and a feeling of complete isolation.
Thank you. Committee, anybody got any questions? Very good. I feel not. Okay. All right. All right. I have 4 objectors down here.
It's just Paul speaking now. It's just Paul Boone speaking on behalf of all.
Sorry, I can't
So
hear you.
it's just going to be Paul Boone speaking.
It's just going to be Paul Broom speaking on behalf of yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening. Apologies for the shorts. It's warm out there.
Okay. Paul, you do have 5 minutes.
Thank you. The current local plan 2035 was forced through by the then Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, with an inflated housing requirement, partly to meet Oxfordshire's commitment to the Oxford-Cambridge Arc. As a result, SODC now have to maintain a 5-year housing land supply for an excessive housing volume. Our district has a high percentage of greenbelt, AONB and floodplains and little infrastructure. Much of the remaining land is agricultural, which should be growing food at a time when food security is becoming more critical. It's no surprise that the actual build-out rates are lower than expected, as it actually benefits the developers to delay their builds, as they know this will reduce the 5-year housing land supply further, meaning access to more and more speculative developments, which they may or may not build. Planning and Infrastructure Bill is currently being debated in the Lords. An extract from the debate reads, there are 700,000 empty homes in this country, not second homes or holiday homes, but empty homes. 1 million planning consents are still available for homes to be built. What's stopping them? It's all about financing and continuing to make the most money. Simply trashing lots of the countryside and trashing nature will not necessarily deliver the infrastructure and homes that people need. In parallel with the LP 2035, Chalgrove created a neighbourhood plan to provide some protection for us against speculative developments. The plan is currently being updated with the addition of a design code that identifies the view across this site as a protected view. The main NDP is also in the process of being updated to ensure currency. However, the feeling from residents now is that the plan is worthless if it provides no protection, a feeling given significant weight by the inspector at the last appeal. The report from the planning officers concludes that the development on this site is contrary to multiple policies in the local plan and neighbourhood plan. It's also contrary to policies in emerging JLP 2041 and Angela's Rayner's statement that we need the right houses in the right places. Unfortunately, the report also contains some significant errors. And one example, in 858, the officers accept the applicant can add dropped curbs and tactile paving on a section of the high street, but it's not physically possible as the pavement is less than half the width required by the Department of Transport. This is still in the application, even though the applicant was shown how narrow the pavements actually are during the appeal walk-around, but they've not bothered to correct it. There are many such errors. I wish we had the time to explore them in more detail. In section 859, there's a reference to maintaining adequate public transport services.
We don't have an adequate public transport service, as you've already heard. There's no doubt that this site will be car-based, which will be a significant issue for those who do not or cannot drive. For those who do, the already overburdened villages of Cooksham and Stadhampton will be the ones who suffer the impact. In section 8.6, there's no acknowledgement that since the construction of the Chalgrove Meadow development, there's been a marked increase in flooding downstream, affecting properties along the High Street and Mill Lane and roads off. 3 1-in-100-year flood events per annum are now commonplace. There's no evidence whatsoever to support the statement in 865 that the development would not contribute to the flood risk of the village. There's ample evidence that upstream development has increased the number of times that Chalgrove floods. The NPPF clearly states that development should not increase the flood risk elsewhere. It's also important to note that the river in question is a chalk stream, and only yesterday the government committed to increase protection of chalk streams, stating that from June 2025, the Environment Agency's updated Water Resource National Framework will place chalk stream environmental needs at the heart of all water resource planning and decision making. The primary reason this is being recommended for approval is the lack of a 5-year housing land supply. All other factors strongly argue against this application. Chalgrove has done everything asked of it, and now we're being told we have to condemn future residents to an isolated area, unconnected to the village, with very limited employment options, very limited retail options, nowhere for their children to be educated, and with an inadequate public transport service that will leave them no option but to travel by car on narrow and potholed country lanes. The JLP 2041 has deallocated Chalgrove Airfield as a strategic location, so the panacea proposed by the applicant to resolve these issues will not materialise. This application is almost identical to the one that was refused in 2022, rejected at appeal in 2023, and declined to be determined in 2023. Chalgrove stood shoulder to shoulder with SODC at the appeal hearing, and we won. We're prepared to do the same again. If you will work with us and not against us, we'll provide the expert local knowledge and highlight the misinformation and outright lies the applicant will tell, but we can only do that if SODC supports our contention that this is not a sustainable development and should be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wooley. Committee, what questions have we got?
Sorry, that was a bit quick, but I only had 5 minutes.
Councillor Sutherland. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
And the previous speaker as well. Absolutely excellent. So just reiterate that the choices people have for travelling to and from Chalgrove, through Stadhampton, up through Little Milton, to the M40, or through Warrington, Stadhampton,
Cooksham and Warrington.
Yeah, Cooksham. So serious impacts for Cooksham.
Potentially, yes. Potentially, you're looking at 160 houses. The average car ownership in a rural location is around 2.5 cars per house. So if you just say 2 cars per house, that's another 320 cars that have to go somewhere. If people work at home, you've got delivery drivers coming in, so they have to come from somewhere. At the moment, Watlington doesn't have its relief road, and also at the moment, Southern Gas Networks are digging it up, so you can't get through Watlington.
Yeah.
Stadhampton at busy times, so at rush hour, is already overburdened. That the roundabout in Stadhampton is always full in the mornings and in the evenings. And also, once you get past Stadhampton, you've got the small matter of trying to get across the Eastern Bypass if you're going into Oxford, or down around the Golden Balls route if you're going further south. There is a route south out of Chalgrove. One, it's on unclassified roads. At its narrowest, it's 4 metres wide. That's Hollantide Lane, which then leads you down through the massive potholes and bumps into Benson with traffic calming, and then eventually out on the road to Wallingford. So it's very narrow. Even the roads leading to Hollantide are single track with passing places. So it's tight. There's no routes north apart from, as you say, Little Milton or Watlington. We have a single B road and some unclassified roads and bridges across the Chalgrove Brook that, according to OCC, have never been checked to find out if they actually have a weight limit, which is of concern.
Any further questions? No further questions, so thank you very much, Mr.
No problem.
Okay, our last, not on our speaker. Our supporter on this one is Eleanor Dunn. She's the agent for Gladman. Yeah. Again, Eleanor, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to begin by thanking members for the opportunity to speak today, and by thanking officers for their work and professionalism while considering this application. I fully support the recommendation of approval. Since the submission of the application in March, Gladman has worked closely with planning officers and statutory consultees to ensure that the proposed development can be brought forward sustainably and in accordance with all relevant technical guidance. As such, a position of no objection has been reached with the majority of technical consultees, including the Highway Authority. As members are aware, a similar application on the site was previously dismissed through a planning appeal, so I would also like to take the opportunity to set out the conclusions that the planning inspector came to and what's changed since that decision was made. The appeal decision clearly set out that there were no technical constraints that should prevent the delivery of housing on the site. It was concluded that landscape impacts would be moderate and that these should be weighed in the planning balance. This is a position that both the applicant and the council agree with. The appeal was dismissed primarily due to conflict with the adopted South Oxfordshire Local Plan and the Chalgrove Neighbourhood Plan. Landscape impacts alone would not have constituted a reason for the dismissal of the appeal. The local plan at the time was relatively recently adopted, and therefore the inspector attributed very significant weight to its policies. As time has passed, South Oxford's land supply position has further declined, which, as set out in the officer's report, means that reduced weight should now be afforded to its policies, particularly those which restrict housing development, such as the settlement boundaries. While the Chalgrove Neighbourhood Plan is being reviewed, no alternative housing sites have been identified through this review, and the updated design policies proposed will be complied with at the reserve matter stage. The development site is sustainably located. The primary school, shops and bus stops in Chalgrove, as well as Monument Business Park, are accessible on foot or by bike. Improvements to local pedestrian infrastructure will be made and will include a pelican crossing on the B480. Over half the site area will be used as publicly accessible open space, creating a safe, healthy, green environment for residents in the years to come. Proposed landscaping and habitat improvements will contribute to at least a 10% increase in biodiversity on the site, as well as creating a landscape buffer with new tree planting to ensure that the proposed development appropriately transitions to the surrounding countryside. Alongside this, of course, will be the provision of new homes, which will be a substantial local benefit. The policy compliant provision of affordable housing will contribute to meeting the needs of those on South Oxfordshire's housing register, who often are living in unsuitable accommodation, and the open market housing will include homes suitable for young and growing families and first-time buyers looking to live locally. Significant financial contributions are proposed to be made to local services to fully mitigate the impact of development and provide additional benefits. This includes approximately £3 million in education contributions, over £230,000 to support the local bus service, and additional payments through the Community Infrastructure Levy, 25% of which would go directly to the Parish Council. It has been acknowledged that South Oxfordshire cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The recent changes to national planning policy strengthen the presumption in favour of sustainable development and make clear that housing requirements are to be met. This is a site which the Planning Inspectorate has found to have no technical reasons for refusal, a position that has been reiterated within the responses received from statutory consultees throughout the determination of this application. I therefore fully endorse the officer's recommendation and respectfully invite members to approve the application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Richie, any questions? Councillor Sadler?
I'm a bit slightly worried about the River Thames, River Thames Conservation Trust objection about the poorly performing sewage treatment works. We just talk through that because I mean, obviously that has come up before for us.
Yeah.
And we're a bit worried about it.
No, I completely appreciate that. So when new development comes forward, the developer will be required to pay a connection charge for each property to fund the upgrades that are required to accommodate the capacity of the new dwellings.
All right. Any further questions? No, I see no further questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the local member is Councillor David Turner. Welcome, Councillor Turner.
Thank you.
We don't often see you at the planning meetings.
It's a very long time, isn't
It's a long time. Right, then you have 5 minutes, and we will be able to ask you questions after.
Yes, of course. Good evening, councillors. Having read the officer's report in its entirety, I was somewhat shocked to see the officer's recommendation for approval, to say the very least. That, given the number of planning policy issues related to it that it's in contention with. The site is clearly an example of what we used to call ribbon development into the open countryside. I ask how long before we see another adjoining non-connected to Chalgrove development application if this one is approved. I note there are conditions to deal with the fact that the village primary school can't take more pupils. We've had 2 other developments and no contribution to the school was made. I note the comments about the lack of public transport, but this isn't really going to help. Bus companies are not charities and need to make profits. Without council subsidies, the current services wouldn't even exist. Planning condition subsidies on transport do not last forever. And I think the lady quoted £30,000. This would be a car-based development against SODC policies to locate homes near to jobs. There is no spare job capacity available at the Chalgrove Industrial Estate or the Martin Baker Aircraft Company. I note that the appeal against refusal at the previous rejected development, the planning inspector dismissed it for many sound reasons which still apply. In particular, development into the open countryside on good farmland and destroying good open rural views. Again, I ask the question, how long before more unconnected applications to the east into the open countryside if this application is approved? The Chalgrove Neighbourhood Development Plan is now just over 5 years old. It has suffered various process delays at SODC and its contractors, something that the planning officer was not aware of when I spoke to yesterday, and I've checked these with the parish clerk today. There is no way you can say this is Chalgrove's fault. The current Chalgrove NDP does not include the site, and neither will the next one. Chalgrove, as the report confirmed, took substantially more homes in the local development plan 2035, growing by 33%. And since then, the new development at the west end of the village has been allowed to increase in number of properties. In no way can Chalgrove be described as NIMBYs. In the SODC filed local development plan 2041, the airfield site has been withdrawn as it is a rurally isolated site with not being necessary to meet the housing targets set by the national government for LDP 2035. Much of the occupation of the 2 new developments have been filled by people moving out of mainly the London area, with many of them commuting back to London for their work. This has forced prices to a level unaffordable by local people. The report clearly states how the application conflicts with many SODC planning policies in the 2035 local plan and in the forthcoming 2041 local plan. The 5-year housing land supply is an issue highlighted in the report. But this was also an issue of the planning appeal into the previous application, but not accepted by the planning appeal inspector. I understand that this application is one of the first caught out by the new NPPF, which came out in December. And at Chalgrove, it's not just Chalgrove that might be affected. However, the planning reasons for objecting to this site are all so strong, and I ask the committee to reject the application. Now, the developer may well appeal, but the reasons given by the planning inspector at the last appeal are still valid, as are the points in the report before you, where they contribute local planning regulations. I urge you to reject the application.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any questions? No other questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. We now go back to the planning officer for any questions. Councillor Sadler.
You've mentioned the 5-year housing and land supply quite a lot, many times actually. Mr. Boone made a really good point about the fact that we have approved applications in the past and they've not been built. And it seems a shame that villages like Chalgrove have to take the consequences of that. Ultimately build the houses where they've been approved first, and not just keep on saying, well, we haven't got a 5-year housing land supply anymore. You've had to improve the plan north of Bayswater Brook, but I don't know when it's going to be built, and that was part of our 5-year housing land supply. So now we don't have it. That shouldn't be an argument for saying we then need to approve it.
So Mr. Boone made some very good points. He was talking sort of as the national picture. I think I'm right in saying in respect of the planning permissions that have been issued and not built out yet. So rather than focusing on our district, in our district we don't tend to suffer from that. It's a place where people want to build fairly quickly. House prices are good, there's good demand, and so we don't tend to suffer from that. I acknowledge that is part of the national picture. You mentioned land north of Bayswater Brook. There's a lot of things kind of post permission that need to be done before they can start on site. That I'm not aware of any difficulties that they might encounter in actually starting on site. Large sites take a long time to come forward. It will be in our trajectory, in our 5-year land supply in due course. It isn't quite yet because of the length of time it takes to start building out these larger sites. Our 5-year housing land supply is an important consideration. There are lots of other considerations. I do acknowledge that, and my report goes into detail about what those are, but a 5-year housing land supply is something that the government thinks is imperative for councils to maintain, and we don't have that currently. So
it's being used in a punitive way.
Yeah.
We're not in debate. Questions, please.
I know. I'm just asking. I was asking a question.
Catherine.
I do have another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm just following up what Councillor Sadler said. I cannot just mention that at the moment there is a consultation by the government. We're certainly not responding on this very issue of whether council should be penalised, by having these unbuilt out things again.
Yes.
So just for the record, but it did strike me listening to everything that what it comes down to is you are recommending acceptance solely on the tilted balance. This is clearly an unsustainable site.
I would agree that my recommendation is based on the tilted balance. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Councillor Norman.
So just one question about your presentation. There was a main picture of the site, which is for up to 160 houses, but only about 20 houses were shown. Is this a deception by the developer to make it look as if there's almost no housing there? Made it look incredibly.
Yes, okay, yeah, I see. I will share my screen again and bear with me.
I think the answer is because it's only an outline. There's showing a theoretical.
Thank you, Chair.
Where the houses might go.
A deceptively theoretical.
Oh well.
So to share the screen, the development blocks are the sort of pale colour. You can see the darker kind of outlines of actual buildings shown. This is a development framework plan. It's purely indicative. If we were to zoom in on the key, I would imagine that those show kind of focal buildings and key frontages that are being identified on the plan. It's the paler blocks of development that thanks Councillor Arlett. Yeah, it's the paler blocks of development that would be are proposed to be housing.
but it is very deceptive, isn't it?
This is an illustrative framework plan. It's unusual for any specific buildings to actually be shown on this type of plan. We normally just get kind of blocks, blobs, coloured areas to show where the development might take place.
Thank you. And this all comes down to the tilted balance,
Yes.
which Councillor Heathrow has already asked about. Is it true to say that the tilted balance is a subjective process?
Yes, yes. I think.
Or has a subjective element?
Yes, it has a subjective element.
I realise that there are inspectors' reports saying, you know, that moderate weight was given to this, or more weight, or less weight, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the assessment of the sustainability versus the weakened case, because we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, ultimately is a subjective decision.
Yes, I think so. In this case, I have based my weighting on what the previous inspector said, because it's only a couple of years ago. Things haven't moved on, particularly, although I take the point about school places has moved on. That's an evolving situation. So I am kind of basing it in what the inspector found on the previous appeal.
We're going now.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Do you have another question, Councillor?
Yes, it's about housing need. So what was brought up was the issue about, I don't know, I'm not going to quote it, but it was 1 and 2 bedrooms are not selling. They're not what's required. That's not what people are after. And quite often, if people are being moved into social housing that don't come from the area, they're not. It's not local need at all. So, you know,
yeah.
So how do you respond to that?
Okay, so we have to consider things in terms of our housing team consider applications and allocation of housing on a district-wide kind of level rather than village by village. I do accept that Chalgrave is slightly different because of where it's located. For example, you wouldn't have that issue in Didcot, say. I'm aware that the is it Meadowbrook, the housing site that was quoted, have had problems selling. They have come to us to ask that more affordable housing is put on the site rather than market housing. Some of that we've agreed to. So there is more social housing now on that site than was originally granted. The original policy compliant level of affordable housing is controlled by the 106 legal agreement, which requires that it does go to local people. What they have done with the additional social housing that they've got on the site, I was actually not aware of that it's gone to people outside of the local area. So in terms of the local housing need, it perhaps is a slightly different picture to elsewhere in the district, for example Didcot, but we do kind of look at things on a district-wide level in terms of our housing land supply is a district calculated figure rather than a local calculated figure. That makes sense.
Right, sorry. Don't want to get too bogged down.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
The audience have asked if you could stop sharing so they can see what's going on.
Sorry.
Right. Have we any questions to the planning officer? We now need to move into a proposal and some debate. Looking for a proposal. Councillor Norman.
I propose that we go against the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Do I speak now?
I need to know your reasons really, and then we'll go see who's a seconder.
Okay. This has been returned down once at planning, and secondly at appeal. At least a previous application was turned down at appeal. This is a very similar application. The only reason this has come back is because the developer thinks there's a chance that the goalposts have shifted just enough to get this in. This is a highly unsustainable site. I agreed with unusually every single word that the objectors raised. I don't need to reiterate those because they put them extremely well. It's wrong on every level in terms of the sustainability. If you allow this, really, you might just as well say, let's give up and just build anywhere at all. I know that isn't a planning reason, but it would effectively mean the end of planning controls because in effect, the lack of a 5-year housing supply is trumping everything else. I note that we did not have a 5-year land supply when the inspector heard the last appeal. And I do realise that the goalposts have shifted slightly since then, but in my view, the tilted balance is not in favour of this. I think the reasons against are so strong that the argument that the lack of 5-year land supply, which is not a definitive rule, it is an indicative rule, does not overrule the reasons for refusing this application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Norman. Is that seconded? Who do I go with?
Okay. Well, MPPF paragraph 11D 2 says when we don't have 5-year land supply, we have to weigh the benefits when we have regard to the key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making efficient use of land, securing well-designed places. Now, this is not a sustainable location. It's 1,000 meters to the shops. We've already identified that this is not a walking distance. Yeah, who's going to walk a kilometre to pick up a pint of milk? In this day and age, nobody. And I'm sorry about the and going on. Then we would look about the well-designed. The inspector previously found that there was a landscape of visual impact and loss of agricultural land, which taken together outweigh the economic and social benefits of the proposal. And now we also know that Childgrove is not well served by public transport, not sustainable. And we know the school is oversubscribed, and indeed it is 800 metres to the primary school. Well, the children could walk there, but it's a bit iffy. So it's not really a sustainable location. And if they can't walk to the Childgrove primary school, they're oversubscribed, there's a long, hard journey to some other school. We don't know where, not Warrington, not Wallingford, not anywhere else. So not sustainable.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Draganetti. I will open the debate. Councillor MacDonald.
I noted the very good speeches, by the way, and there's the one who was for, but it came to the Thames water and the sewage issue when they can provide a connection. But I suggest that maybe the connection to a creaking sewer system might not be able to take these 160 plus houses, which could be a threat. Some of the chalk rivers and streams in the area. So that's an aside almost to the main considerations of, unlike the previous application where putting social housing opposite railway station with very good bus service is an excellent idea. Putting social housing in the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere with poor connections is not such a great idea, and we'd be doing disservice to the families who maybe have no choice but to move in there.
Thank you. Anybody else, Councillor Arlett?
Can I just say, I'd rather be a councillor than over a planning officer.
Yeah. Is that it? Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, infrastructure, schools, I local need for 1 and 2 bedroom houses. I don't think so. And in terms of Angela Rayner's statement, right houses, right place. It isn't, isn't it? I mean, it just isn't, and that's all there is to it. So the only thing they've really got is the 5-year house and land supply. I'm dead against it.
Anybody else wish to speak before I go back to Councillor Norman? No, I'll go back to Councillor Norman myself. I don't think there's much something up to do.
I just say that Chalgrove has suffered enough.
Okay, so I have a proposal for refusal on the same grounds as previously.
Chair, would you like me to give some guidance around
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
So the proposer and seconder referred to the previous reasons for refusal, which, to recap, are conflict with the development plan, the adverse landscape impact, the lack of school places, and the lack of connectivity. They were sort of the key 4 identified
Yes, but you're going to have to
previously.
you're going to have to support this appeal. So.
And this is about whether members consider that those harms, when taken together, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefit of providing the new homes in this location, having regard to the National Planning Programme. So I think I'm clear that Councillor Dragonetti and Councillor Norman are essentially saying that those 4 harms that I've identified are the key factors for tipping them against supporting this development.
Are we content with that?
I would defer to Councillor Dragonetti as being more expert in these matters. But is this not a case where you put everything in that you can possibly think of on the grounds that there will be an appeal?
I would advise you not to, that you don't approach it with, can we just throw everything at this? You tailor it to the case.
Are there other material planning considerations?
I think I've covered the key ones. So just to repeat, the conflict with the development plan, the harm to the local landscape, the lack of school places, and issues around connectivity. And I think those are the 4 key.
Certainly not sustainable.
So, what is, when you say conflict with the development plan, does that cover conflict with the neighbourhood plan as well?
Yes, it does. Insofar as the neighbourhood plan is part of the.
They are jointly and severally not supporting this.
They don't allocate the site for development, so it can be said factually that this doesn't comply with an allocation.
Okay, and is the concern about the chalk stream and the connectivity with the sewage system, and is that all? Could that also be material?
My advice is I think those issues can be dealt with by appropriate conditions, and in an appeal scenario, they are not as strong. They can still be mentioned in terms of the hearing the third parties' strong views on those issues. It wouldn't preclude them from raising those issues in an appeal scenario, but for the district council, for purposes of our focus and reasons for refusal, I think I've given you direction on what I consider to be the 4 stronger reasons.
Thank you.
Okay, so a proposal made and seconded. All those in favour of refusal, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chalgrove.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Right.
we will work with you on this.
Can we have a break to get more water out of the chair?
Yes,
I think this is a 3 glasses night.
We're up to 8:10. Well, this is going to take a bit more than 20 minutes, I think. So we a vote just to continue to.
I propose that we carry on.
Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Otherwise, Matthew will pull the plug at half past. Right, we're on to agenda item. I don't know what answer it is from.
I think it's number 9.
I think it's number 9.
Page 107.
It is, yeah.
And it's P25 S0643, land at Warren Hill, Stadhampton. And the planning officer is Chris Hill. Haven't met Chris before, so welcome, Chris.
Good evening, councillors. Just by way of an update before I begin, there are 3 minor corrections concerning my committee reports. Firstly, I have inexplicably managed to horizontally invert the location plan on page 1 of the report, and I would ask the committee to refer to the location plan within Appendix 2 on page 148, committee fact when considering the application. Just for layman's terms, the fact of that. In addition, I have incorrectly referred to the bus service that serves Stadhampton as number 151, but it is in fact number 11. Finally, at the end of paragraph 7.1 of the committee report, it incorrectly states that the material considerations are discussed and weighed in the planning balance section in section 9, when it should read section 10. The proposed application is made in outline of access to the site not reserved, or the matters are reserved for later consideration. The proposal is a residential development for up to 15 dwellings, including affordable housing, public open space, and associated infrastructure. The previous application was refused on the 11th of March in 2019. The refusal of this application and reasons for doing so is a material consideration in this current application. It was refused for 5 reasons, which I have summarised: an excessive number of dwellings for the size in relation to the size of Stadhampton, a lack of evidence or demonstration that the site could comfortably accommodate 30 dwellings, insufficient drainage evidence, and reasons 4 and 5 were due to a lack of a legal agreement. This application was refused under delegated authority granted to officers and was not appealed. The application site itself is located on the eastern edge of the village of Stadhampton, between the village built-up area and New Wills Farm. The site covers an area of approximately 1 hectare. The site edge blue, as shown on the location plan, does include a field north of the actual proposal of the application, but is not proposed for development. It would singularly be used for the deliverance of biodiversity net gain. The application site is not subject to any designations in terms of landscape conservation or species protection. The site is Grade 3 agricultural land. At present, Stadhampton does not have a neighbourhood plan, nor one is in an advanced or prepared state. As a matter of fact, during the application process, a small number of additional documents were submitted and accepted, including a revised biodiversity gains calculation, which was reviewed by the ecology officer, and a revised parameter plan to include additional details. Turning briefly to the principle of development, which I won't labour on the basis of the fact that obviously we've covered up a lot of matters concerning private housing land supply in the previous application. The application would itself be located on the edge of Stadhampton, which is itself a smaller village under the settlement hierarchy. The application is not situated within either an allocated site or any other kind of allocation. Policy H8 of the local plan concerning housing in local villages outlines that the council will support development within smaller villages in accordance with policy H16, which concerns backland and infill development. It is considered that whilst the application is modest and limited in nature, it is not strictly considered infill development, and this is material to the planning balance exercise. We have, of course, extensively explored the private housing land supply matter. Suffice to say, obviously, on the previous appeal decision, we are considering that we have 4.1 years of housing land supply. Therefore, permission for housing is looking to be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly demonstrate outweigh the benefits. I won't labour that one much further. I turn then to technical matters prior to returning to the planning balance exercise. In terms of affordable housing, the proposed development would have 6 affordable homes with a 10-year mix as advised by the council's housing team. It would also be delivered in accordance with accessible and adaptable homes. In terms of landscape, the application site is a medium-sized arable field of predominantly grassland. Just realised I should be putting a couple of pictures there with me. The proposed development would marginally extend the current edge of Stadhampton. The landscape officer has assessed the landscape visual impact assessment that was submitted with this report and has no objection. The allocation of I'll switch over to this plan. The would retain, so it would expand into countryside, but would retain the eastern edge portion of the site as public open space intended to prevent coalescence with the rural structures to the east. Proposed development would be considered to have a localized impact on the landscape, the immediate vicinity of the site, and on the immediate setting of various dwellings that would sit adjacent to. Turning to trees and biodiversity, a single tree and a small group of trees are to be removed, with the Council Forestry Officer agreeing this would be acceptable, subject to sufficient landscaping on a reserve matters application. The Ecology Officer has confirmed that the site can achieve a 10% uplift in biodiversity, which would be conditioned, along with conditions pertaining to biodiversity enhancements, species protections, and lighting strategies. Turning briefly to design, although the proposal is an outline application, the applicant has submitted an indicative layout and parameter plan for consideration. They have also submitted a design access statement that outlines the design approach and expected design choices to be made. The application does propose 15 dwellings. The previously refused application was refused on the grounds that the proposed number of dwellings, being 30 at the time, would be excessive for the size of the site and the location and settlement of Stouthampton. As mentioned previously, another reason for refusal related to the lack of evidence that the site could accommodate the number of dwellings. The proposed development is for half the number of dwellings, and now sets aside nearly half of the actual site for public open space. From the submission as a whole, it is clear that the site can now accommodate 15 dwellings and will be of a comparable density to the residential developments that it would join. Paragraph 7.43 of my report sets out the expectations in terms of design concerning future reserve matters application. Some concerns have been raised by members of the public about proximity of the proposed dwellings and separation distances. The illustrative layout achieves the required back-to-side distances of greater than 12 metres, whilst the back-to-back distances exceed 25 metres. This layout is not fixed, but it would be subject to further scrutiny at a reserve matter stage to ensure that the neighbourhood amenity is preserved. Concerns about loss of view from residents are noted, and these comments are considered as part of the landscape impact earlier in the committee report. But specific loss of view from a resident is not a material planning matter. Turning briefly to transport and access, combined vehicular pedestrian access to the site would be taken from Warren Hill from the west. Proposed that access will be achieved by removing the existing turning head and extending the carriageway and footway into the site. OCC Local Highways Authority have stated that the principle of access is acceptable and would just seek additional details via condition, including swept path and turning analysis for waste vehicles and some such within the site. Parking would be laid out within a subsequent reserve matters application, but the illustrative layout has demonstrated that OCC compliant quantum and arrangement parking can be provided, including visitor parking. I will just briefly switch to the pictures concerning the actual proposed access, and then just demonstration of where that access is to be extended from. This, I'll go back to that one for a second. Oh, that's not gone the way it meant to. There we go. The Local Highways Authority have noted that Stouthampton itself is not well served by public transport options and that facilities are somewhat limited within the village. Notably, the number 11 bus does serve the village and provides a functioning direct route to Oxford City. It is acknowledged that most residents would make use of a private vehicle for the purposes of healthcare, secondary and above education or larger shopping trips. The chip generation has been assessed by the LHA and deemed acceptable in terms of daily trips and associated impacts. The LHA have also noted that the pedestrian pathways and connections and have expressed that given previous appeals, notably on the ones to the site to the south, that they would consider them acceptable, including on matters of sustainable development. Contributions to the public bus service would be sought and secured by a Section 106 agreement. Briefly touching on final matters, in terms of drainage, both the OCC, the Local Flood Authority and the Drainage Officer and Thames Water have not objected to the proposed infiltration and SODC features to be utilised on site, and these will be conditioned. On other matters, contributions to be secured are outlined within the committee reports. Archaeology as well as environmental matters, including contamination, air and waste, have been deemed acceptable, including construction management plans to protect the immunity of future residents and neighbouring residents. Owing to the modest scale of the proposal, OCC are not seeking education contributions for the proposed development and have also not objected. Turning very briefly to the planning balance, the application is contrary to the policies Strat 1, H1 and H8 and would not be infill. It would enlarge the settlement and would result in the enlargement of the built-up settlement of Southampton. As explored within the previous application that we've discussed, there exists a below 5-year housing land supply. Therefore, the tilting balance is engaged with the weight given to this above policy conflict, reduced weight. The application would provide housing, including a policy-compliant provision of affordable housing. This is afforded significant positive weight. The site's occupants would be reliant on the private car for a number of their needs. The inspector on the adjoining site has assessed this to not be a significant issue, and therefore this is considered neutral on the planning balance. Proposed development would provide construction jobs and additional resident spend, but given the scale of development, this is afforded limited positive weight. Proposed development would encroach into the countryside, but the arrangement of the site, a modest number of dwellings, minimum harm. This is therefore afforded limited negative weight. Development would result in some loss of grade 3 agricultural land. However, some loss is inevitable in order to secure the level of delivery of the levels of housing required. Limited negative weight is therefore afforded to this. The introduction of the revised NPPF in December 2024 has only reinforced the need to boost the supply of housing, particularly affordable housing. Whilst there are impacts which weigh against it, notably conflicts with the development plan and some very minor impacts on the countryside, taken together, they do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of providing additional homes. Declining until the expansive proposal is therefore recommended. Permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in the committee reports and of course the legal agreement.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That was yeah. Right. I have two speakers, so we'll call Paul Wilkes.
There's only me. Chris is here supporting.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry,
I wrote this completely separate to the previous people, but you're going to spot a lot of trends. Thank you to the committee for hearing us. We are representing the residents of Warren Hill, along with the numerous respondents from Stadhampton who objected to this application during the consultation period. Stadhampton is a small village of around 300 properties. We have very few facilities and a poor infrastructure to support further development within the village. Despite information in the application, we have no village pub or village shop. There's an expensive small Marks and Spencer's at the petrol station with few day-to-day essentials, an even more expensive farm shop, and a bar with inflated prices at a boutique hotel used predominantly by hotel residents and diners. There is no post office or any other shops to provide employment. The application states there is good public transport infrastructure with bus access to Culham railway station, which is totally incorrect. The applicants confuse Cuxham, a small village on the bus route, with Culham. Culham railway station is not accessible by bus from the village, has a small car park and is a 20-minute drive away. Oxford railway station is over an hour away by a limited bus service and then a 15-minute walk to the station. Accessing the bus stops from this end of the village requires either going around the dangerous blind corner on the Newington Road Tame Road junction, which has no path, or via a gravel driveway between privately owned properties, totally unsuitable for prams and wheelchairs. Pedestrians are then faced with trying to cross the hazardous entrance exit to the petrol station, which can be difficult for the most able-bodied adult, but even more for the infirm and small children going to school. The only bus service, number 11, runs less than once an hour between Watlington and Oxford. As we've heard, the service ceases at 6 p.m. Anyone wanting to use the bus instead relies on a cart should they wish to go anywhere in an evening. There are no bus services to surrounding areas such as Wallingford, Abingdon, Tame, or any of the science parks for employment, all of which add further traffic to our roads, which will be made worse by this development. Schooling is a major issue. The primary school and nursery in the village are already running at capacity, made even worse by developments in Shelgrove, where we've heard the primary school is already at capacity and no way of expanding. Developments in both Shelgrove and Watlington have led to the only secondary school accessible by bus, Ignore Community College in Watlington, becoming oversubscribed. Any further developments will lead to both primary and secondary pupils having to travel further afield, adding even more traffic to the struggling road network. The only doctors on the bus route, Watlington and Shelgrove surgeries, are not accepting patients from Stadhampton. Therefore, the nearest doctors is Berensfield, which is 4 miles away, can only be accessed by car as there are no buses, cycleways or parks. The flood risk in the application is inaccurate. In recent years, numerous areas in the vicinity have flooded, including the Bridle Way and ponds that lie on the northern border of the proposed site. This led to the local brook flooding, local drain sewers overflowing, and many properties in Stadhampton being flooded, the severity of which long-standing residents said they had never seen before the development at Hampton Meadow at our end of the village. Increasing the volume of impermeable areas due to the development will only increase flooding risk further. The sewerage network is already at, if not exceeding capacity, and this results in villagers being told several times a year to avoid flushing toilets, etc. Any more housing will further exacerbate this situation. Warren Hill itself is a narrow cul-de-sac at only 5.4 metres wide. Due to a lack of off-road parking for the existing houses, numerous cars are already parked on the road, which leads to issues for waste services and emergency services accessing properties. The proposed application would almost double the number of houses on Warren Hill, increasing traffic not only from new residents, but also from delivery services, including for food delivery, as the only other option is to travel by cars to a weekly shop due to lack of facilities. The proposed land is used for grazing sheep and creating silage. This proposal would not only create encroachment into the surrounding countryside, enjoyed by many, but also remove valuable farming land at a time when we're being told to be more sustainable. The previous application for 30 houses was refused, and this application for 15 houses is only using half of that land. We believe this is an application by stealth. Should it be passed, the applicant will attempt to increase the number of houses by building on the remaining land to provide a similar number that were rejected before. Our roads are already heavily used, leading to substantial queues on Newington Road past the junction of Warren Hill, which traffic from this development would join, due to the increased volume of traffic we are seeing on the B480 Tame Road. Previous applications passed within the village on Newington Nurseries, which access Newington Road directly, remain undeveloped years later, presumably due to the lack of desire to live in the village because of the poor facilities and the poor infrastructure. Several houses of varying sizes and prices are for sale in the village and have remained so for months despite reductions in price. There's no lack of current housing available in Stadhampton, but people do not want to live here. It lacks the schooling capacity, public transport, facilities, infrastructure. We strongly object to this application and urge the committee to refuse it. Thank you to the Planning Committee for hearing our concerns.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilkes. Tracy, any questions?
Just a brief question. Yours is a smaller village, classified as a smaller village under the
correct. 300, about 300. Yeah.
How much housing? What percentage increase has the village seen over, say, the years since 2019?
So in 2019, Hampton Meadow, which is the one I referred to before, that has 56 houses on it. So we went from 240 to near on 300. So what's that, 30%?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Wish. Right, so I have Alex Munro, who's a sportsman. It says here in person, but I think he's online.
Hello, good evening. That is correct after a strong recommendation from your officers by email. However, still perfectly capable of saying my piece. Thanks for letting me speak on behalf of my client, Manor Oak Homes, in support of their application for up to 15 new homes, including 6 affordable properties on their land at Warren Hill, Stadhampton. Firstly, I'd like to reiterate my support for the strong assessment and conclusions of your officer, who obviously recommends approval of this application this evening. The proposal before you for consideration is the outcome of an extensive level of pre-application survey work by my client, and then close liaison with the case officer through the course of the application. The scale, mix, and layout of the proposal has largely been shaped by the expert input of the applicant's technical team in respect of landscape and ecology in particular, also drainage, may I add, and highways, whilst also seeking to avoid the harm it was concluded would be caused by an application at the site in 2016, which proposed double the number of homes, a figure that my client, who wasn't the applicant at the time, accepts as, of course, excessive for this site. From the outset, we considered this site to be one which could accommodate a village-scale development of low to medium density, one far more characterised by landscaping, planting and open spaces than a dense suburban-style scheme, as we saw as part of the 2019 application. We hope members recognise this response to the site and the scheme that's before you. We note this scheme is brought to committee with no technical objections against it. That's, of course, important, very important. These include positive responses from highways, landscape, drainage, and ecology, most notably. Of course, there are no other objections across any of the statutory consultees. The parish councillors raised concerns, albeit without formally objecting, and those concerns are addressed in the committee report, primarily in relation to supporting infrastructure. Equally as importantly, previous government inspectors have concluded the village a sustainable location for appropriate levels of growth. Specifically, Oxfordshire County Council confirms there will be sufficient school capacity. The village primary school currently has spaces as of last week, so June 2025, with other infrastructure improvements to be delivered by the approximate £200,000 of community infrastructure levy money the proposal will generate. There will also be a contribution towards improved public transport services secured by a legal agreement. Future residents will then enjoy life at a village that we consider is well served by local services, irrespective of people's preferences, including regular buses to and from Oxford that will help to significantly reduce reliance on car-borne journeys. We then draw members' attention once again to the need for new homes across the district, covered in great detail and consideration of the previous application. It is then appreciated that the likely preference in bolstering the immediate 5-year supply, which is currently deficient, will likely be to secure a smaller scheme such as that of my client, which will deliver and contribute swiftly. This application represents an ideal opportunity to secure a mix of new homes in a fashion that causes no environmental, social or economic harm, and indeed brings a range of additional benefits such as affordable housing, a boost to the local economy, biodiversity gain greater than 10%, public open space, and a contribution to the viability of Stadhampton. On this basis, I urge you to support your office's recommendation and approve my client's application this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Monroe. Sorry, committee, has anybody got any questions for it? Councillor Dragonetti.
Yes. On the application, there's marked down as a sensitive area of public open space. Could you tell me what the plan is and how that is going to be, if the ownership is going to be retained, or if there are going to be any legal agreements to maintain it as public open space?
I think currently the plan, I mean, we still obviously have to enter into Section 106 agreement, which obviously will be prepared if members are minded to recommend approval tonight. In terms of the future of that land, I mean, first and foremost, it will be genuine public open space. The chances are it's going to be a management company employed by whoever will be the eventual developer of the site, likely not my client. But that will secure it primarily by way of the Section 106 as public open space in perpetuity.
Thank you. Councillor Norman.
The previous speaker objecting raised the point that the density of housing appears to be the same as that rejected at a previous application. He said that the previous application was for 30 houses, but that was on twice the area. So this is now 15 houses on half the area. Is that actually correct? Is it the same density as was previously refused?
I don't have the precise. If you give me 2 seconds, I have the obviously sitting on my computer. I have the benefit of actually looking at the planning statement. I can tell you the actual current density. We obviously have it listed as medium density at the moment. My understanding is it's approximately 20 to 25 dwellings per hectare. Obviously, you know, the developable area has been reduced. Part of the criticism of the previous application was that effectively it maxed the site out, so it was covered north to south in development without provision for open space, landscaping, softening of the boundaries. The density will probably be approximate to the previous application, albeit the views of the site from the north and east in particular will be very, very much rural edge, softened by the landscape strips. Would you like me to find the precise density, or is that sufficient?
No, thank you. I got the figures. Thank you. The development area is about a hectare. Is that correct?
I would have to check. I think is that in the officer report potentially?
I think it was. I can ask the officer.
Yes. So sorry. So the site area covers 1.04 hectares in its totality. My understanding is the developable area is slightly greater than 50%.
Oh, sorry, 1.04 hectares is the total area.
It's the total area of the site.
These 15 homes will go on about half of that area.
As my recollection, yes. As I say, I can confirm, but I mean, obviously, looking at the parameter plan, it's largely indicative of half the area of the site. I think it's between about 40 to 50. I think it's about 40 to 50% of the site.
So that's medium density, isn't it? I think when you spoke just now, you said low to medium.
Low to medium density, yeah.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. No. Thank you very much, Mr. Monroe. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Okay. Right. We'll see on the Wood. The Wood Councillor Georgina Heritage, and she's on holiday, I believe. We've wanted to make the meeting, so I've agreed to read a statement on it, which I will do. I appreciate the planning officer's position on this. However, an application of 15 dwellings represents a significant development in the small village of Stadhampton, which I have called this planning application to committee. .24 of the officer's report states a parcel of land within the same ownership sits to the north of Newell's Close. As this land sits outside the red line, would not be developable local land, but may be used to secure biodiversity net gain. Is this parcel of land identified in the recent planning application, for which planning was approved for 4 dwellings? This doesn't make sense, therefore. The application also references regular bus services, including a public transport to Culham. This is incorrect. There's only one bus service which operates infrequently between Oxford and Watlington and not in the evenings. It doesn't serve Culham in any way. I think we've covered that, haven't we? The mention of the local pub is also incorrect. The Crown closed down some time ago, and the Crazy Bear is a hotel and restaurant mainly used by people outside the village. It can't be classed as a public house, just as a niche farm shop, the Wild Pig, can't be classed as a village shop. The farm shop is very specialist. It's mainly used by people from outside Southampton. These are the discrepancies in the report, which I think committee members should be aware of. I would also like to draw committee members' attention to the following material consideration. Transport and traffic. As mentioned, the single bus service is unsuitable for commuters, and there are no public transport links between Southampton and the surrounding towns for health appointments or shopping. The roads are not considered safe cycle routes by residents. Bearing in mind the lack of facilities in the village and the residents' dependence on cars, the proposed 15 residences could easily bring at least 30 vehicles, if not more. Aside from the obvious parking problems this is likely to bring to Warren Hill, queues of traffic already form along the A329 at busy times. The A329 and B480 junction is particularly affected. Adding to this will only impact the A329 significantly, but it's also likely to gridlock Warren Hill itself. It can already be difficult to exit Warren Hill at busy times. Increasing the housing stock also will significantly on this road is highly likely to cause unreasonable queuing and access issues for residents. Shops and immediacy. The only shop in Southampton is a small M&S within the petrol station. As I've mentioned, local people do not use the Wild Pig farm shop for daily goods. Many residents could not afford to, and its grocery offer is very niche. Again, there is no village pub. The nearest pub is 2 miles away in Chislhampton. I know from work I did there last year, while it's accessible by foot in the suburbs, the narrow pathway from Southampton to Chislhampton easily becomes overgrown and difficult for pedestrians to transverse. There are no health services in Southampton, so residents have to travel to nearby towns for all medical appointments. The village school is already oversubscribed, as well as the village preschool, which is full as a waiting list. Additional housing on this scale will likely mean that children in the village are able to attend the local school and have to travel by car to schools elsewhere. Flooding. Although the site is in flood zone 1, it is surrounded by flood zone 2 and 3 land. I'm aware of properties in Southampton that suffered severe flooding in the past 12 months, and we know that this is no longer a once in a 100 years event. Parish Council is currently having to explore various projects to try and mitigate this. The very site on which this development is proposed has been affected by flooding, and last year's situation was so bad that the pathway from Warren Hill to the local school became impassable. I ask that committee members consider the severe lack of amenities and public transport in Southampton, along with inevitable additions to at least 30 vehicles in a part of the village that's already suffering from traffic problems, including the impact of queuing traffic on the residents of Warren Hill. I also ask that members question a parcel of land in the same ownership, which has just received planning permission for another 4 dwellings, which, when added to this particular application, would actually result in a total of 19 dwellings. The biodiversity net gain isn't clear. Please confirm the problems Southampton is already facing. Please consider that the problems Southampton is already facing, including oversubscribed school and severe flooding issues, which will be exacerbated by development of this size. For the reasons stated above, I consider the additional 15 houses to be unsuitable and an overdevelopment of this village. I'm not taking questions. Right, that was a local member. She doesn't like it, does she? Right, questions for the planning officer?
Actually, well, it's about Councillor Heritage's thing. You mentioned a parcel of land at the recent planning application P25S1057, which planning was approved for 4 dwellings. I tried looking that up actually, and I can't. It's unfortunately the website's down, so I can't quite see it. But how does that impact this application?
I wouldn't specifically say it has a material impact in this, obviously,
Because this is the parcel of land at the other side of the Lord's Lane, isn't it? Is that right?
Not entirely sure myself, if I'm honest.
I think the inference in that one is that that land is used to offer biodiversity net gain.
I thought
Yet
that
it's been built on, it's got planning permission, so it's not going to offer that.
That's right.
That's what the inference was.
That's what I'm referring to. Yeah.
Check that.
I wonder if someone provide a reference. Yeah,
Yes,
Heritage got it in her.
P25/S1057.
Didn't quote it, did I?
Slash
P25, that's 1057.
N4B.
There's a clue there in terms of the suffix on that application, which tells us that it's about converting existing buildings rather than new build. But my colleagues might kindly find some more
Was it
information.
SG682? Sorry.
It's S1057. N4B.
Confident that it doesn't relate to the parcel of land.
I think they're two separate
The
matters.
two separate items, but there's something about the BNG for this site was to be taken on that other site, and that was the inference I read that, but I can't see where this is actually said it.
The BNG would have to be satisfied some other way in any case, wouldn't it?
It would, yes.
It would, yes.
It would be
Even if the inference in the report is it's going to be there,
Yes.
it can't be.
Yes.
Therefore, they would have to do it somewhere else.
Yes.
Yeah. And have to buy it or whatever they want to do. with it.
Yeah. And it's
2.4. 2.4, apparently.
I think
2.4 in your report.
right. Got it, I think. Yeah, so that's conversion of buildings on Newell's Farm, which is to the east. So it wouldn't be the only parcel of land that's within the blue. It's helpful. I can share the location of that quickly on the meeting.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
everyone's
it's got
got
it.
we could the avoidance of doubt, wouldn't it? If we
Yes,
could just get
Oh,
the
Yeah. So the application site, just to zoom out briefly, and I'll stay in this place actually, is this parcel green strip of land. And the application site that we're referring to here is a building over here, conversion of 4 dwellings.
Sorry, Chris, could you just do the application site again
Yeah.
quite slowly, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course. I'll zoom out a touch here. So the red line section of the application site is this strip.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't have both the references open at the same time, unfortunately.
That's fine.
And the blue line section of the land is across Newell's close here.
Yes.
And the application that's referred to by Council Heritage is this blue line box over to the east.
Yeah.
Which is a
So,
separate.
Yes.
yeah, I think it's a separate issue.
So
though, isn't it?
it would obviously not impede biodiversity net gain
I
delivery.
think it's just one of the things you need to come out of your report, really.
Yeah.
I
Sorry,
think
what was the relevance of the land to the north of the road?
It's within the applicant's control. It was also part of the application that was refused in 2019. It remains within the blue line. It cannot be developed on as part of this application, but it could be used for the deliverance of biodiversity net gain through the additional planting, etc.
And could it be subsequently developed?
It would not as part of this application.
No, but
That's-
it would be
that's
open to a
separate
further
application.
application.
Okay, we're still, sorry, Councillor on.
So I didn't know whether Councillor Sadler had finished. You were
I
still.
think you can only ask one question. So go ahead.
Could you just go through the reasons? So this area was subject to a previous planning application, but not an appeal. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at that planning, that came to committee.
No, it was refused on delegated authority.
Okay. Could you just reiterate the reasons for refusal quite carefully?
Yeah.
You went very rapidly.
Understandable. I was just mindful of time.
Yes.
Would it be helpful if I just I think the first two reasons for refusal are pertaining to the location, size, etc. So would it be helpful if I just read those out in full briefly?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. The proposed, so reason number refusal number one was the proposed development would result in significantly larger scale development than that deemed appropriate for a smaller and less sustainable village with limited services and facilities. It would not comprise infill development. Instead, it would result in the considerable expansion of the village into the open countryside. As such, the proposal would not accord the district's category for growth and necessary infrastructure, contrary to, and I won't read out what the policy. Take that. Reason for refusal number two, the application fails to demonstrate that approximately 30 dwellings could be adequately accommodated on the site, whilst achieving a high quality place created of good design with appropriate public amenity space, which is in keeping with the rural character and the existing settlement pattern. Therefore, the proposed amendment failed to respect the rural character of the settlement and its setting, and therefore conflicts with the policy.
So further to that, I've got two kinds of questions. One is, are you satisfied that the density of the housing is acceptable for the type of village under your guidelines, planning guidelines that you get? Is the density of housing acceptable?
So there's 3 points in that question. I think it would be helpful if I just briefly outline that the previous application did make use of the parcel of blue lands to the north and proposed dwellings on there. That parcel of land, by my calculations, is approximately 0.42 hectares. So the overall density of 30 dwellings on that size of land would have been in the region, plus minus probably one, depending on the exact figure, of about 20 to 21 dwellings per hectare. With the reduction in the land to 1.04 hectares and with 15 dwellings, the density is approximately 14.5 dwellings per hectare. So it's a reduction of about 5 to 6 dwellings, depending on exactly how you take those figures. That is a comparable density to the area that it's situated within, which is in compliance with the joint design guide. And they have submitted an illustrated plan which demonstrates that the site can comfortably accommodate those 15 dwellings.
So part of the reason for refusal was not just the density, but because an area that was out with the village envelope was to be included. That's to say north of, I don't know the road names, I'm sorry, the north of the road.
Yeah. Technically, all of the actual development can be considered to be outside of the village envelope on the basis of the fact that we're not considering it to be infill development. Obviously, that's one of the actual factors that's considered within the plan balance and as part of the utility balance exercise.
Yes, I understand. However, the area to the north is not surrounded by any other housing.
Correct. Absolutely.
And I just have a general question, which may be more for Paula. So, are the reasons given for refusal? We seem to be very obsessed with reasons given, either at planning appeals or whatever. Are we limited to reasons given at previous committees or previous determinations or previous appeals in objections?
That is a good question. The planning history of a site is always a material consideration, especially where it's relatively recent. So I would say the council's position and reasons for refusal are of some relevance in your decision making, insofar as I think they effectively limit the reasons that potential reasons for refusal that you could cite in connection with a scheme. And I suppose the factors that I would ask you to take into consideration is this is quite a significantly different scheme. We do have no technical objections. And there was a third point. I think, in my opinion, the development this time better relates to what is around it. And as Chris has just touched on, in terms of density, I think that better reflects or respects the existing prevailing density in the area. So I see some distinctions between that and the previous scheme, which you should take into account in your assessment.
Thank you. That's very clear.
Okay. Any further questions? No further questions. Therefore, I'm looking for a motion.
I propose adopting officer's recommendation. As the scheme, this proposal is different from last time. So I think the provision of the public open space, with the assurance that it's going to be secured in perpetuity, is quite an attractive bonus and a planning gain. And I think that to the reasons to approve the scheme.
Yeah, okay, was that seconded? That's Norman, seconded?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, do you wish to speak now or wait later? No, okay, going to debate then, is there any debate? Councillor Sadler.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about the flooding situation there. We know last year there was a serious flood there. The Thames was backing up onto School Lane. Several residents there had some serious problems. They mentioned don't flush toilets. This is the truth. That's what happened. I don't think the 15 houses will be in that flood area, but the impact on that is it's clearly a worry. And we come to a lot of the same problems with Chalgrove, which is insufficient public transport, lack of schools, not an obvious need for all this extra housing in places where there's no employment, no public transport, no jobs, and so forth. I think there was the flood that affected School Lane, but there was a whole section of Southampton which was just completely impassable. You couldn't drive down one of the lanes down there that goes off to one of the villages. I can't remember where it is, but it was completely impassable. You couldn't move. And then we have the sewage issues as well. So there's a lot of similarities with Chalgrove, only smaller. It's a sort of 10% size, but basically you've got the same fundamental issues going on.
Chair, could we just come back in terms of the flooding issues, because we've got technical bodies that have been consulted on that very issue.
Just going to say things yourself.
And obviously the county council as lead flood authority, no objection. Our own drainage officers who are aware of that event. And then in addition, did you consult with Thames Water?
Yes.
Yeah, and Thames Water and no objection as well. So they are factors that would be.
And
with respect, and I know you're very experienced in this, and I'm a layman of the public, but I find it unbelievable that the kind of flood that we saw in Southampton last year, they're saying yes, that's fine with us. I'm surprised there's not any kind of recommendations about that. I mean, we had a road disappear in Little Milton as a result of this as well. I mean, it was a very serious situation.
Yes, I think the answer is that they are aware of that. They have looked into it. Yeah.
And this development has to be assessed in terms of what it is proposing. It doesn't have to address other issues that are in the local area. So in terms of does this application is it acceptable as it's presented, and the technical experts say yes it is, and that would be the way that it would be assessed in an appeal situation.
But we are in debate, and I'm very aware of that. I don't like to go into officers' comments when we're in debate. I have a proposal. Sorry, where are we? If there's no more debate, I will go back to you. The seconder to comment to talk.
Yes, whether it's in debate or otherwise. I would just say that the background to this, as it was for the last one, is the lack of 5-year housing land supply. We had to have incredibly strong reasons for overturning that on the tilted balance. And I feel, regretfully, that although there seem to be lots of valid reasons why this village doesn't need more housing, that the tilted balance isn't strong enough. The objections aren't strong enough in this case to overcome that tilted balance, whereas I felt that they were very strong in the case of Chalgrove. So, with some regret, I'm supporting the application.
Okay. I'll go back to Councillor Dragonetti to sum up.
Yes, well, it's another development in the countryside, but the good villagers of Southampton may complain. They can only got 2 places to buy their food from in the village. Not sure they're lucky to have any. And there's only one place they can have a drink in. They're jolly lucky, and they've got an hourly bus service. Again, jolly lucky compared to many places in South Oxfordshire. And so, while it's not sort of perfect location, or maybe some floods, well, that's again how life is. So we might be in a few years' time we complaining about the heat rather than about the floods. So that's why I think why I propose proposing the officer's recommendation.
Right. So I have a proposal for officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please show. All those against? 3. I voted for it, so I'm going to vote for it. Yeah.
So to be clear, that's on the chair's casting vote, that would be 4-3.
Would be 4-3. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, committee. We have no staff to consider.
Yes, no, appeal information this time.
No appeal information. So thank you. And it's before 9 o'clock. Are we turned on? No, we turned on.
Susie, can you stop the broadcast, please? Thank you.